hands-free microphone that you are welcome to use also. Tonight, for those who will be joining us via Zoom, we will have the option of the raise hand icon at that point in our meeting. And so again, we welcome you tonight. All members are here. This evening, we had no closed session items. So that takes us to our invocation and Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, our invocation will be led by Senior Pastor Hillary Chrisley from United Methodist Church, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by our City Attorney, Bill Winder. I invite you, Pastor Hillary.
Gracious God, as our city leaders prepare to discuss and listen and decide about the issues before us, we pause to speak to you first. We ask that your compassionate, healing, and life-giving power be woven into this time. And may we listen for your voice, heed the Spirit's nudges, and focus on what would bring you delight. We also begin with gratitude to say thank you for those who already every day respond to others with your measure of grace, those who lead by serving, and those who connect people with needs to people who can help, those who share the gifts of literacy and food and shelter, employment and security. Thank you, and thank you for caring about Glendora and all who call this place home. Amen.
And if I can invite you all to stand and face the flag of the United States. By the way, it's nice to be back in this historic building, to actually meet in person. So if you'd join with me in the pledge, I would appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, Pastor Chrisley, and thank you, Mr. Winder. That takes us to student reports. Tonight we have none. And then we move on to reordering of or additions to the agenda. Does anyone wish to reorder or add anything to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, that takes us to public comment. Tonight during our public comment, we invite you to fill out a speaker card if you wish to speak in person. For anyone who wishes to speak via Zoom, we will invite you to use the raise hand icon before we close public comment. So at this time, I will open the public comment time and invite Audrey Teasdale to please come up to the lectern. Good evening. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, just a moment. Let me get
Okay,
organized here.
thank you.
Good evening. I am here to talk to you about an area that I live in and is being severely impacted by this development. This is Sierra Madre, this is Leodora, this is Barranca, the road that's in question. And here is what is being proposed, a 40-foot road coming into where my driveway is in green, 12-foot. The road should be considered a local road because of the size, it's only 25 feet, Barranca. And it is being called in your community plan, it is referred to as a collector, which is a 40-foot road. It's wrong. You're also saying that there's sidewalks up here. There are not. So you're dumping a 40-foot road right in here. I have an issue because my driveway is right here. And the only way I can get out is to back out. It's been that way. My house has been there for 58 years. It's the only way. This is going to be a big issue for me. And I don't understand why the plan was this way and how it was approved. I don't think it was approved properly because you did not do your environmental impact reports correctly. So I did mention that it is my primary driveway to a 3-car garage. I did not mention that. My family uses it daily. This is making it very unsafe and very hazardous up this area. And something needs to be changed and done about this. Barranca was supposed to be, you can see it's 4 lanes here, it's 2 lanes, not even striped here. It should be widened the full 30 feet. Instead, the plan is now to taper it. For what reason, I don't understand, but this is going to be a chokehold bottleneck problem right here. And I'm right in the midst of it. This is wrong. It should never have been designed this way. There are many areas in Glendora where the road is fully widened and then there's an angle that fits the existing street. So then eventually it can be widened. This was not done here. It should be done that way. I challenge you to walk this area. I want you to see that this 30-foot road is only 25 feet because the curbing is bad there. The gutter and curb, it doesn't fit in. But tonight, I want you to know that the developer I've talked to the developer. He sees this as unsafe and hazardous condition on Barranca, and he's willing to move the road north and to pay for the changes with the city. But apparently the city agency says, no changes. Why would that be? And what can be done about this? That's what I want to ask you. But tonight, is it really? Okay, so what can I do?
We have your contact information on your speaker card.
Okay,
Sorry, we can reach out to you and discuss this further.
so it's interesting because I've tried to reach even the city manager and I have not got a call back from the city manager on this. So I don't know what approach to take on this. It's very, very frustrating. Can you suggest something that I can do?
We can follow up with you from your contact information.
Okay, and who would that be that would follow up?
Probably someone from the city manager's office or from our planning and development office, but we will reach out to you to
City
discuss this
manager.
further.
Okay, that would be nice. That would be nice to hear from the city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak tonight during public comment?
We have received one request via the Zoom participants. I'd like to state once again for the Zoom participants, if you would like to give public comment, please use the raise hand icon on your screen. We do have Joe Cena who has requested to give public comment at this point. Joe, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes,
Thank you, sir. You've got 3 minutes. Appreciate it.
thank you very much. Madam Mayor, City Council, City staff, my name is Joe Cena, President, CEO of the Glendora Chamber of Commerce. And I do apologize not being there with you in this evening, but I still wanted to take part in your meeting and listen to all you're going to say. I don't think my time started on here. As the chamber, we continue to work with our businesses and our residents to try to improve the business climate, help our businesses, be promoted and to help them succeed. Just some things coming up, but first I wanted to thank Mayor Davis for your presentation at the annual State of the City Live at the Glendora Country Club. It was a great presentation and we had a great crowd there and everyone really enjoyed it. Some other things coming up, we do have a couple ribbon cuttings. The new Clearwater development, they're doing a ribbon cutting for their sales office on the 21st, but then we'll have one for the actual location when it's done. Montage Paint, they're off Route 66 and Grant on the 29th. And then we have different workshops coming up on ransomware, how to deal with that in businesses and many more things. Also, State of the Schools, we're going to have that this year. It will be a Zoom webinar. Again, like it was last year, it will be the last year for the Zoom. Just with the schedule and schools opening up and the college opening up, we just felt it'd be better to do that this way. So that will be May 12th at 6:30 p.m. free of charge. And you can reserve your spot at glendorastateoftheschools.com. And then also we're having Cuisines at the Foothills Restaurant Week, May 16th through the 22nd. It is a week-long, we're going to be promoting our Glendora restaurants for everybody to go eat local. And then we're also going to have some special events. We're going to have a secretive speakeasy, soon to be announced, and then other tasting events. So there is some live stuff too. like we had Cuisines before, but different. So you'll be able to get your password soon on that. Then with our advocacy work through our Legislative Action Economic Development Committee, we continue to follow bills coming through the state and the upcoming ballot measures that once they're all set, we will have town halls to try to explain them to everybody. And so we can all vote properly. So with that, the chamber is here to help. And we're proud to be part of the great city of Glendora and your partner in helping our businesses succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sina. Do we have anyone else on Zoom wishing to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. We received no further requests via the Zoom. I've checked the public comment email and no requests have been received.
Okay, thank you. With that, then I will close public comment and bring you back to council members for statements and reports. Councilmember Thompson.
Madam Mayor, and I echo what you said. It's great to be back live. And this is new for, all of us. It's been a couple of years, so welcome. The goal line continues to succeed. As most of you have seen, a lot of work is being done. Bridge 1 is working well on Grand. All of the facial stuff is really coming out and looking good. Route 66 is being built, and that is coming along well, as is Lone Hill. The station is really being worked on. A lot of good growth is going on there. Parking lot is being prepped. And if you've gone by there, a lot of the buildings are gone and everything is looking well there. Next month or next time that we meet on April 26th, I'll have a more extensive, update. The goal line board meets here in the next day or, two, which I will be at. And so I will have more to, update then. But with that, that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Alawas.
Thank you, Mayor. It feels like riding a bicycle coming back. It's kind of strange, but nice as well. I love the lights that we have up here. It makes the room look a little bit bigger, and the lights temperature is a little bit different as well. I have a couple questions for city staff. There is a media post about our streets, about water leakage, and wanted to know how long it takes once identified to fix the water leak, or at least to start to address it.
Sure. Water leaks, when reported, if the staff goes out, we have an on-call staff member at all times of the day that will go out and assess the leak. If it's significant, it'll be addressed if it's really significant. Otherwise, if it's not, staff will mark it off. They need to go out and mark utility lines, call in. That could take up to 48 hours, and then a repair is scheduled. So the repair that was reported for the leak off of Cullen and Sierra Madre was repaired on Monday afternoon. Had been reported by several people. So it depends on the severity and the ability to do some of the marking of other public utilities that are already in the ground.
I know we're going to be talking about this a little bit later on, but the water that we lose, does that go against our restrictions that we have by the state?
So Chisholm's in there, and we'll speak in a couple minutes, but on water loss, but that is an annual amount that we do report.
Okay. So at the last planning commission meeting, there was an applicant that came up and spoke about a car wash and about how much they were going to save. They're going to save somewhere, it's going to be 20 to 30 gallons, I believe, that they were going to use in washing a car, and stated that the average car for residents to wash is 125 to 150 gallons per car. I thought that was a little excessive, so I went online and did some checking and found out that it's for some of the surveys out there is about 50 to 75 gallons, which is still a grain of salt. Who knows if that's true or not? So I thought, you know what, the best way of figuring this out is myself. So I went to Ace Hardware and bought one of these little goodies here that puts on the end of your nozzle of your hose and wash my car. Granted, my car is a little smaller, but that's beside the point. And I use 4.5 gallons of water. Such a big disparity as far as what's out there. So I went to our website to look to see what we have on our website for any baselines or education material on this. I couldn't really find anything specific to this issue. But with all the cars that we have here in Glendora, I would think that this could be a huge watershed moment. to save a lot of water if properly educated, and seeing if there's a possibility of getting a grant to buy some of these things. This was about $17 and change, that's for full retail. But at least to start educating pockets of people out there of washing their vehicles. I mean, I use a nozzle, and there's probably other folks out there that might not, just let the water run as they're washing a car. That's extremely wasteful. So I'm asking staff if we can maybe look at this and see what other cities may do about washing their vehicles. And if we can get something like this and give them out. I know we give sprinkler heads, hose guns out as well. But maybe there's a different approach we can take if that indeed is actually happening, 75 to 100 gallons of water, or even more than that. That's obsessive. So anyway, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's my great pleasure to have the opportunity with these colleagues to be here for my first live meeting. I'm pleased to be here. I would have thought I would have had a greater audience, but thank you for TV land.
They knew you were going to be here.
Yeah, perhaps. So I wore my Easter shirt and everything. On a more serious note, 3 weeks ago, I had an opportunity to attend an Independent Cities Association seminar, working seminar on behalf of the city. And I moderated one of the panels, and the panel was the protecting our community from crime surges with proactive and reactive solutions. And I was honored that our police chief, Matt Egan, sat as one of the presenters and panelists on that panel. And let me tell you, he hit a home run out of the park, did a remarkable job. Thank you, Chief Egan. And I think between the two of us, the cities know where Glendora is now, and they know of Glendora. It was very engaging, and thank you, sir. It was a remarkable presentation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. Springtime in Glendora, we've got a lot of things going on and a number of things coming up. I just wanted to give a shout out to some of the staff and volunteers. A few weeks ago, the community services hosted camp. Why can I never pronounce this word? The dirt camp up at Kauai. Camp Kauai, more commonly known as Dirt Camp, during the spring break, and they'll be doing it again in the summertime. But I know they had a bunch of kids up there and did a great time. And then on Saturday, April 2nd, we had Trails Days, and that actually continued through COVID, and we did have a number of those. But we had about 50 volunteers out to help take care of the trails, including the mayor, who was out there cutting brush back and up and getting dirty while I was sitting down having a hot dog on the bench in the park. But anyway, we were both there. Then we had the opportunity to honor a number of students over at Whitcomb High School last week. And again, nice to get back in person. We actually had handled 2 quarters worth of awards while we were there. And that event is sponsored by the Glendora Police Officers Association and Kiwanis Club. And thanks to them for that. This past Saturday, we had a community meeting to discuss the future of South Hills. And we had a number of people show up, got a lot of great feedback and ideas. And those meetings will continue as we move forward. And we look forward to everybody getting involved in that conversation, because the South Hills is extremely unique to the city of Glendora. Not a lot of cities have a mountain in the middle of their community. So we're looking forward to being able to do some things with that. And then coming up, we got our Easter egg hunt, annual Easter egg hunt coming up on Saturday. Starts at 9 o'clock. It was reminded to me that it starts at 9 o'clock and ends at 9 o'clock and 45 seconds. So if you've ever been there, the kids take off, and within a minute or so, every egg in the entire park is found. But that will be going on at Finkbeiner and at Gladstone Park. People see the construction at Gladstone and worry that the Easter egg hunt may not be happening. It will be happening at Gladstone as well, starting at 9 o'clock. And then April 23rd, we've got Earth Day coming up. Again, Earth Day will be here at City Hall from 9 to 1 o'clock. And then On Monday, April 25th, we're going to be having a joint meeting with the city council and the planning commission to discuss our housing element here in town. So you've heard us talking about the housing element for a number of years. There's a lot of things happening that the state of California is requiring that we do moving forward, and it's going to affect the future of the community of Glendora and basically every city in the state of California as we continue to go forward. So if you're interested, please tune into that. We'd like to have some participation, and we'll try to figure out a way to accommodate what the state's requiring. So those are just some of the things that are happening, and it's good to see people back involved again. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. And just, I think, so no children are disappointed. I think 9 to 10 is the pancake breakfast, and then 10 o'clock is the egg hunt. So that way, if they show up at 9 looking ready to hunt the eggs, they might want to wait till 10 possibly.
I stand corrected.
That's okay. I
Unless
just
it
don't want
actually
any.
starts at 9 and they show up at 10, then I'm blaming you.
Yes, well, thank you. We can check the website in between.
Thanks.
But thank you to all of our staff that made tonight possible to pull this all together to make a hybrid meeting tonight. We know has taken a lot of folks behind the scenes and working on all of this. So thank you to everybody that made it possible. Also tonight, we have a few proclamations. One of them that we issued this month but are not reading tonight is for Donate Life Month. The month of April is Donate Life Month. And it is a time in which we reflect upon those little pink dots on your driver's license, reminding everyone that gift of life that you can give, and remembering those who have made that gift of life, and also those who have been recipients as well. So just a reminder about that. And April 27th, the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. If you want tickets, you can go online to the website. You can see me or any of my colleagues. And that's April 27th, 7:30 a.m. at the Glendora Country Club. And also tonight, joining us in our meeting, we want to give a shout out to Chief Flores from LA County Fire Department. Welcome, sir, and thank you for being here tonight. All right, that takes us to city manager and city attorney statements. Gentlemen, anything to report? Okay, very good. Then we will move on to special items. Our first special item tonight is a proclamation recognizing April 10th through the 16th, 2022 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. Councilmember Alawas will be presenting that proclamation, and here tonight to receive it is PSR Michelle Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello.
I was told I have to give a speech.
After I read this.
Okay.
No stress. Whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. They are the vital link between the citizens or victims and the public safety provider who may apprehend a criminal, save their possessions from fire, or save their life or the life of someone else. And whereas each day, public safety telecommunicators answer, that's a tough word, telecommunicators, answer desperate calls for help, respond with services that save lives and property of citizens in need of assistance. And whereas the safety of our police officers, firefighters, is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who call the Glendora 911 Communications Center. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of the Glendora Police Department have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals and treatment of patients. And whereas during 2021, Glendora Dispatch handled a total of 37,162 calls for service, with 3,502 being 911 emergency calls. The phones in the dispatch center rang a total of 162,211 times during 2021. And whereas Glendora Dispatch exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism while performing their job every day of the year. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Glendora, do hereby declare the week of April 10th through April 16th 2022 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week in the city of Glendora in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and residents safe. In witness hereof, the mayor has set her hand and caused the seal of the city of Glendora to be affixed this 12th day of April 2022.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Glendora City Council and City Manager for recognizing our dispatchers for their hard work and tireless effort throughout these unprecedented and ever-changing times. Even with staffing shortages, we make sure every shift is covered and there's always someone there to answer your calls. Your Glendora dispatchers take pride in being the calm voice behind the scenes, serving the community by answering questions, relaying public information, and most importantly, providing emergency assistance in your most trying times. It is a great honor to be recognized on Dispatcher Appreciation Week. We thank you all for your ongoing support.
And we know that oftentimes the jailers have to assist as well in answering the phone. So shout out to Alfonso Magana. Thank you, sir. That takes us to our next special item tonight, a presentation of a proclamation declaring April 3rd through the 9th, 2022 as National Library Week. Tonight presenting that is Mayor Pro Tem Boyer, and tonight here to receive it, Vice President of the Library Trustee Board, Brianna Chu.
Okay, whereas the Glendora Public Library is an accessible and inclusive place that fosters a sense of connection and builds community. And whereas Glendora Public Library offers opportunities for everyone to connect with new ideas and become their best selves. And whereas Glendora Public Library and its services extend far beyond the walls of the building, and everyone is welcome to use its resources. And whereas in times of crisis, libraries and library professionals play an invaluable role in supporting their communities, both in person and virtually. And whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. And whereas libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for all. And whereas libraries, librarians, and library workers are joining library supporters and advocates across the nation to celebrate National Library Week. Now, therefore, we, the Glendora City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of April 3rd through 9th, 2022 as National Library Week in the city of Glendora, and encourage all residents to connect with the world of ideas through the library services. In witness whereof, our mayor has hereunto set forth her hand and caused the seal of the city of Glendora to be affixed this 22nd day of March, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Davis and City Council members for having me here tonight. And thank you so much for recognizing everything that the library has done for our community. I'm so honored to be accepting this on behalf of the library and the Board of Trustees. So like you guys mentioned, National Library Week was last week, and we use that to recognize all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. So we thank our library staff and our librarians under the leadership of Director Janet Stone for making the library what it is today. And as you guys all know, in February, we kicked off our 50th at 140 celebration. And for those in the audience who don't know, we are celebrating 50 years at our current location. And that's not to be mistaken with the actual birthday of the library, but we hope that the rest of you guys will come to our celebrations in the summer where we continue to celebrate this milestone. But yeah, the library is growing to more into a place where you don't just go there for physical books, but also to have an open space to connect with anybody in person and online. And as we grow our online materials as well and our online services, we are helping people connect, like you guys said, every day to the world of ideas. And so my one little thing that I wanted to remind everybody is that the next time you go into the library, it's never too late to say thank you to our staff members. There are little Star Service award slips that you can fill out and write a personal thank you note to our staff or the library in general to remind them how much they mean to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. And, I just want to add that many people, we all use the library at some point or another, but if you don't realize, as we've been through a crisis, which it talks about this last couple of years, the library never shut down. It never shut down. There were people in there working constantly, setting up ways for us to have access to virtual books and have curbside pickup and a variety of different things. And it was pretty amazing that when the world was turned upside down, we could still rely on the library and the people that work there. So we thank you very much for that.
And this room is special, not because it's the council chambers, but because it once was the library as well.
This used to be the library.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody.
And I see that Mr. Aguirre is here. Mr. Aguirre, can you clear up the Easter egg hunt dilemma, please?
You were correct, Mayor. 9 o'clock starts our activities, 10 o'clock the hunt, and by 10:02 it's over.
Thank you, sir.
Rub it in. I have a wife at home that corrects me all the time already. Okay. Thanks, John.
Thank you. And that moves us to item 4, presentation on water supply outlook and drought mitigation actions. And tonight to give that presentation, Assistant Public Works Director Chisholm Obagala, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Certainly nice to be here present in person to have this discussion today. We are entering the third year, consecutive year of what has amounted to be the most severe drought in California's history. And so today I'll be providing a water supply outlook and some of the actions that the state is currently taking in an attempt to mitigate these drought conditions and the impact that has on us here as a local entity. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, please. And so this outlines the theme of today's discussion. Again, we'll briefly touch on the drought conditions, but the meat of the presentation will be focused on the state water project system, which is extraordinarily challenged by the current drought. And we'll talk about some of the mandates that are currently coming out of the state. And again, the impacts that will have on the city of Glendora and our surrounding communities. And again, we'll have to double down on public outreach and education, as Councilman Allos mentioned. So we'll talk about some of the things that we're currently doing and putting in place to be able to achieve that. Next slide, please. I like to start out with this graphic. This is the Northern Sierra precipitation, otherwise known as the 8-station index. Relatively simple graphic, but tells a compelling story with regards to the variability of the hydrologic regions that we are seeing here in the state and within our local regions. And again, this accounts for the cumulative monthly precipitation for the state of California. And just a couple of things I want to point out. Number one is the average precipitation, which is highlighted or indicated by the light blue shaded region there. And this, again, this is from a water year, which on average is typically from October to October. And so we see about 53.2 inches of rain. And again, the extreme at the top there, 94.2 inches was in the green is what we saw in 2017. And this was indicative of the wettest season in the state of California. Conversely, going down in the black last year, 2020 to 2021, we only received a mere 24 inches of rain. But more importantly, what we're currently tracking is in the blue. This is for this water year. And what that's showing is, we received a substantial amount of rain, as you recall, late last year. As a matter of fact, we were on track for the wettest year However, at the turn of the year, that has since flatlined. And this is a result of January, February, and March being the driest in California's history. And so again, this sort of tells the story of that volatility that we're seeing with regards to our hydrologic regions. Next slide, please. And so a big component of our water supply is the state water project allocations. And so I wanted to just kind of give a very fundamental background in terms of the key components of the driving factors that go into a state water project allocation. So when we say we receive a 10% allocation or 15% allocation, what does that really mean? And how does that impact us here in Glendora? So if we can advance once. One critical driving factor is the snowpack, and this is measured from the Northern Sierra snowpacks. And more importantly, if we advance one more, is the snow melt runoff that materializes from this snowpack. Again, on average, we like to see about 70% runoff, which means we lose about 30% to evaporation or absorption to the soil. However, as of recent, due to the aridification of the region, we are noticing that this runoff is decreasing to about 30 to 40%. And so we're not being able to capture as much of that tangible supplies in our Irville system as we would like. In addition to the snow melt runoff, if we can advance one more, we also have to take into consideration the rainfall. And this is, again, this is tracked in real time. The State Department of Water Resources tracks this rainfall. We also here track it regionally through Metropolitan Water District. And so both of those supplies go into Oroville, which is a key storage facility for the state. If we advance one more. And so both of those entities are then exported through the Sacramento River to the Bay Delta, which is a very delicate ecosystem. As you can imagine, we have to find a way to balance water operations, imports and exports of supplies, as well as practice environmental stewardship. We do have a number of species that call this habitat home, and we have to make sure that they have a conducive place to stay. Majority of those species are endangered. So again, this is a challenge that the state is currently dealing with. And if we advance one more. In addition to flows from the Sacramento River, we also receive additional flows from other tributaries, primarily the San Joaquin flow. Again, all of this is collected into the Bay Delta. And then if we advance one more, all of these supplies are then exported to the state water project contractors and or the San Luis Reservoir, which is another key storage reservoir for the state. And so if we can actually go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So we have, this slide identified the 29 state water project contractors. And the map there to the left shows the geographical location of where these contractors are located. As you can see, they span across the entire state. Really, and they're broken down by region, just north of Sacramento there in the Feather River region, as outlined by the pink, all the way down to Southern California. And if we can advance one more, Kevin. We are in the Southern California region, specifically within the Metropolitan Water District region. And just to sort of explain the relationship we do have with Metropolitan Water District, we're not a direct agency to Metropolitan Water District, meaning we actually go through Three Valleys Municipal Water District to be able to attain state water project on this system. Next slide. And so lots of information on this slide, so we'll try to get through it, but this shows a breakdown of each state water project's maximum allocation. And again, this is based on 100% allocation. And as you can see in the first column, we have a total of 4.17 million acre feet. And this is what the state is obligated to provide each contractor. And if we can advance one more, Kathleen. And so Metropolitan Water District is by far the largest contractor on this system at 1.9 million acre feet. And so when we say we have a 0% allocation, that means we're not receiving anything. We're not receiving any of that 1.9 million acre feet other than human health and safety. And so if you can advance one more. And so this shows the historical allocations for the state water project system dating back to 1967. One of the key lows is, if you can see in 2015, that's marked in red. This was the first time we actually reached a 5% state allocation. And of course, this was unprecedented. We thought we would never see this again. However, in 2021 and 2022, we again reached another 5%. And again, what this is showing us is that we have to continue to rely on other alternative means to be able to supply water to our region. Next slide, please. And again, this sort of shows the trends of where we're heading with the state water project system and continuing to find alternative means to get water to the region, invest in our infrastructure reliability, invest in recycled water project through strategic partnerships with Metropolitan Water District and Three Valleys Municipal Water District, continue to invest in redeveloping our wells down in Irwindale. And again, what we're showing is that we can no longer rely on the state water project system to be able to maintain our water supply. Next slide. And so all of these developments, how does that impact our local supplies? How does that impact what we do in our operations here in Glendora? Well, majority of our water is supplied from the main San Gabriel Basin, which is what is shown here. About 80 to 90% of our water supply emanates from the main San Gabriel Basin. And you can see in the blue circle is the 4 wells, or actually the 8 active wells in which we use to get retrieve water. And if we go to the next slide, Kelly. This shows essentially, again, that this system is as well being tasked by supply shortages. And what's shown here is in the black line, you can see that is the natural key well elevation. And so the blue line is the augmentation of that supply with supplies from the state water project system. So as we're seeing less and less supplies from the state water system, that line will continue to decrease. And again, we cannot continue to sustain supplies with that supply. So we have to make sure that we, again, look to alternative regions to be able to supply our waters here. Next slide, please. And so again, all of these developments has led to Executive Order N722. And this is significant because this is the first time the state has encouraged local agencies to bolster water conservation. And so I just wanted to show this excerpt. Following the driest first 3 months of a year in the state's recorded history, Governor Gavin Newsom today took steps to drive water conservation at the local level, calling on local water suppliers to move to a level 2 of their water shortage contingency plans, which requires locally appropriate actions that will conserve water across all sectors. And so if we go to the next slide. Before we talk about how that will actually impact our city here at Glendora, I want to talk about our actual annual water demands. And so if you look at this chart, our average water demand is around 11,000 acre feet. And as a matter of fact, if we go to the next click, and you can see, and we've hovered around this demand. So really the question is, and we guess how much more can we save? How much more water can we conserve? Dating back to 2004, again, we steadily decreased our demands. And then coming back to 2013 is when we actually increased again to 12,000 acre feet. And if we go to the next slide, this is our monthly water demand, and it really shows where we can actually decrease within a month. And what we're noticing is this is not specific to Glendora. This is very prevalent across, Southern California and throughout the state. We tend to utilize more water in the summertime, May, June, July, August, September, as evidenced by the red bar there. And so as Councilman Alice mentioned, this is our opportunity to be able to educate our public and provide information on how we can drop down that summer average and ensure that we drop down the total average for the year. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. And so, going back to the state mandate to the water shortage plan level 2 criteria, there's essentially 3 criteria that we have to meet in order to be able to drop down to a level 2 shortage. Number 1, the city's water production for the current fiscal year is reduced to 25% below the production level. Excuse me, I just had some work done in my dental. Water levels have dropped an average of 44 feet. And so what this means is we certainly meet that water level and we can certainly move toward 37% loss in groundwater production. Thank you. And so item 2, imported water is needed to meet 40% of the city's water system demand. Again, we've more than met this criteria. Last year, from 2021 to 2020, we were actually able to utilize more than 50% of our imported water from Three Valleys Municipal Water District. And then lastly, item 3, upon recommendation by the Water Commission that a water shortage exists, we do plan on taking this item to our commissioner at the April 28th commission meeting. And again, get their input and have a robust discussion around this topic, and then bring it back to this council for a final recommendation. Next slide, please. And so this will inevitably impact our community if we move to a water shortage level 2. And this lists some of those impacts. Number 1, we have a 10% reduction for all consumers. How do we plan to accomplish that? Prohibit use of potable water for washing, hard surfaces, driveways, sidewalks. Again, the biggest impact here is prohibition of outdoor watering. We want to restrict or prohibit our outdoor watering from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Sunday. And then continue to monitor this, irrigating turf landscape during and 48 hours following measurable rain, and continue to prohibit that. Educate our restaurants, they can only offer water upon request. And also hotel establishments, they can only institute daily washing of linens and towels only upon request. And again, as a water agency, it is incumbent upon us to, again, double down on our education and make sure that we adequately educate the public on what this means in making water savings a way of life. Next slide, please. And so this sort of outlines the violation procedures and fees associated with this impacts. Again, we do want to continue to work with our constituents. We found that we have not had to fine or impose levies on our constituents. They are more than willing to work with us. First violation is, of course, a courtesy notice. And of course, we understand that we have to have a transition period. And in this transition period, we will continue to develop a robust education plan to be able to continue to to educate the public on what these mandates mean and moving to a level 2 shortage plan. Next slide, please. And again, community outreach is critical. First and foremost is implement a citywide drought communications plan, meet with local establishments and community events, fix a leak week, Earth Day, partner with our institutions, Glendora Unified School Districts, and also develop a robust residential programs. We have a number of indoor device rebates, rain barrel giveaways, free water audits, and as we found out today, water flow meters for our car washes. So again, continue to utilize these tools to be able to educate the public and really make an attempt to drive down that conservation and that drive down that demand across the water year. Next slide, please. And so just to summarize, the intense drought still persists. Again, we're seeing conditions that we haven't seen before. We did just see the driest January, February, and March in California history. State water project allocations are low. Our ground reservoirs are low. And so all of these actions is leading the state to call for an increased conservation here at the local level. And so our recommendation today will be to move to a water shortage level 2, which provides an up to 20% reduction from previous year. And again, continue to educate the public, continue to utilize tools to provide means in which the education can get involved and help the city conserve. Next slide, please. And so this provides our recommendation today. Number 1, to discuss this item with our Water Commission, receive input at the April 28, 2022 Water Commission meeting, including moving to a stage 2 water shortage contingency plan. And item 2, to return to the City Council with a final recommendation in May of 2022. That concludes my presentation today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And the other tool that you've implemented that I love is the water portal. I'm signed up for that both at the church and at my house, and it's already alerted me at times when too much water's been used. So that is a great tool. So thank you. Any questions from council?
Yes.
Mr. Alawas.
Thank you, Mayor. Chisholm, thank you for your report. You're in a tough situation leading this issue. and I'm glad you're there leading it. Currently, right now, are the residents under the 55 gallon per person per day mandate?
No, that is not a mandate that we're currently under. That is something that's currently being developed by the state. And essentially, there's three sectors or three categories at which that would be applied. Number one is indoor water use. Secondly is outdoor water use. And then lastly is businesses, institutions, schools, commercial establishments. And so this really presents a challenge for the city and really for surrounding municipalities as this comes down from the state to determine how we are going to mandate that if it comes to mandate. But currently it's just a recommendation.
Any idea if that will come down as a mandate?
Again, that it's looking likely that it will. And so what some of the challenges that will present for us is, for example, in areas which you have multiple residents, for example, large apartment complexes, condos, we would then have to have, as opposed to having a master meter, we would have to have sub meters for each of those units. In addition, for our single family homes, we would have to find a way to measure both outdoor and indoor use, which will most likely be having 2 meters. And what type of financial obligations are we going to have to impose on ourselves as an agency, which would then be imposed on our customers. So again, there's a lot of discussions and developments around this topic, but it has not been finalized. We'll just see how it develops.
2 last questions. How will this affect the city itself? And are we going to have to report for the city usage itself?
That is correct. We are going to have to report if it indeed becomes a mandate. How are we going to report that? Again, that's to be determined. Right now, we are in conversations with both the state and the regional level 3 Valleys Municipal Water District to see what type of restrictions that will impose on us.
Has this affected the twin tunnels?
The Cal water fix from
Yes.
no, it hasn't. Not to my knowledge.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chisholm. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to public hearings tonight. We have none. That then takes us to consent calendar. I would like to pull item 7. And before I call on Assistant Finance Director Kyle Johnson, I'll ask if there's a motion for items 5 through 8 and item 9.
I would move that.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Thompson, a second by Councilmember Alawas. If we can record that. Go. Not doing. Go. Is there a second?
My system wants to restart.
Okay, so we will note that in the minutes. That is a second by Councilmember Alawas. Here we go. Here we go.
You
Now we
didn't
will-
feed it.
Yes, now we will open for a vote and we will announce a roll call vote for the Zoom participants. Councilmember,
Yes.
thank you, Councilmember Alawas, Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Davis.
Yes,
And that carries 5-0. Thank you.
thank you. That takes us back to item 7. Kyle?
All right. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So the item for you tonight is the monthly investment report. So tonight we're presenting both February and March together. We recently transitioned to a new investment advisor that helps us with a new report with a lot of value adds from our previous report. And they prepare it for us. So we're freed up to do a lot of other fun finance things.
Count those beans.
As you can all imagine what those things may be.
Funny man.
And so there was a bit of a transition there. We transitioned at the end of February and some of the cost information took a little bit of time to come over. So that's the reasoning for the combo report of February through March. The value adds include the credit ratings of our investments, generally have to be rated A or above. We have a maturity schedule on there in addition to a alphabetical list by investment type. One of the other big reasons we went and our new investment advisor is UBS Financial Services. I have Jim Giordano here and Lee Chen, and they're available to answer any of your questions. And we have, a list alphabetically by investment type, and then also a maturity schedule. So which was not present on our previous report. So those are definitely value adds to our report. One of the other big items is a value savings of about $14,000. So we used to have fees with our previous custodian. Now UBS is our custodian for investments. So if whether we buy an investment through another broker dealer or through UBS, we would provide that information. We'd send the money to UBS, they hold it for us, and now we don't pay any fees on it, where we used to with US Bank. So that was one of the other big driving reasons for the transition with the custodians and financial advisors. They also offer more active review of our portfolio and assistance with meeting our investment policy requirements. So I don't know if there are any other questions, and at this point I'll have Jim and Lee introduce themselves.
I know that Councilmember Thompson was reading these reports on his European trip and salivating over it. So he probably has some questions to ask you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I've briefed both of them on. You may be the one to have the most questions or to be the most have the most interest.
Yes. So Councilmember Thompson.
Well, I do want to say thank you to staff for making this move. As Adam knows, I've been, what's a good word? Nagging you. I guess that's a appropriate word since we're in a public space.
Nudging, nudging.
That we need to do more. And so I really do appreciate this, being a finance guy. I guess a question that I have is, I really hate cash, but within the marketplace, I guess we're doing okay with cash because at least it's not going down. But is there anything that we can do to move some of that cash out and make some earnings more, or is there a limit, a threshold that we have to have for liquidity things that we need?
So the answer is yes. So part of the cash on the report, if you're looking at it, we have about 2 million in our Bank of America, and then the rest will be in Life. I believe it's about 21 million that's listed
Yeah,
on our report.
right.
So it'd be about 19 million in Life. So part of that was the transition and moving toward the new investment advisor. I was hesitant to make a lot of new investments while we were going through that period of transition. But yeah, now that is something we can kind of talk about with UBS and look at, see what's the best bang for our buck out there, along with any cash flow needs. The biggest thing I can think of coming up is we got our POB payment coming up in June. And then we're, I think, in a lot of capital projects that have gone out for design and maybe up for construction coming up eventually. So those are just things we'll keep in mind as we look for investment opportunities.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. You know, what I would like to do is see this again in 6 months, and I'll probably have a lot more to ask then.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Allows.
Thank you, Mayor. So as my colleague wants to roll the dice big, my concern is a little bit, some of the financial institutions out there are calling for a recession sometime around the end of the year. How are we positioned? Since sounds like we're positioned well in cash, we should be fairly safe. What do you think of the portfolio with that scenario?
Yeah, I will let you take that one.
All right. Madam Mayor, council members, it's an honor to be here tonight representing our team. To answer your question directly, you probably already figured out I'm Jim Giordano, this is Lee. But to answer your question, we have 17 positions that will mature this calendar year. And with each one of those, we are looking to match up any reinvestments with what your cash flow needs may be. The general strategy of the portfolio is a buy and hold strategy. We're not looking to be active traders in this, which means, you know, as interest rates have gone up, you'll see from the report that it's showing a negative return and that there are currently bonds that are showing below par, below 100. The good news is, as the maturity comes, they go back to being par. So as long as we're maintaining this buy and hold strategy, we're not taking the interest rate risk that would come with what's currently happening.
What would be the return on investment when the bonds mature, because then they would be at par?
So the current yield on your portfolio is a little over 1%. If I was looking at what to reinvest things in right now, a 2-year treasury is yielding about 2.4, where a 5-year treasury, which would be about the maximum length that you're allowed to go, would be 2.6.
Are you staggering the bonds?
We absolutely are. Right now, your portfolio is very concentrated in 2025, slightly less than half of the portfolio. So we'll continue as things mature to make sure that we're evening that out as best you need for what you have in the future projects.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl.
I applaud you and thank you for making the reports simple enough for a non-money guy. My financial fund is spent, so it's, but no, thank you and welcome to the team.
Thank you. We're honored to be here, and I hope we didn't ruin your European vacation. I have sat on the Planning Commission in the city of Cerritos, and I've sat there while the date changed, so it's always my goal to be brief and not subject you to that. But we'd be
appreciate
happy
that.
to make sure we get all your questions answered so that we can work well together.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, any question? Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate it. And thank you for working with us on this and look forward to making Mr. Thompson happy. So thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you all.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion on item 7.
I'll move item 7.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alawas and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer to receive and file the monthly investment activity report for February and March of 2022. If we can vote, and I will take a roll call vote for the Zoom participants. Councilmember Alawas.
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer,
Yes.
and Mayor Alawas. I mean,
Mayor Davis.
I'm so sorry.
Mayor Davis said yes.
Thank you. So sorry.
All right,
And that
thank you.
carries.
That takes us to member agenda items. We have none. Unfinished business, none. Moves us to new business. Item 10, comprehensive update on the services to individuals experiencing homelessness and award of contracts to LA CATA and Union Station Homeless Services. And tonight to report on that, Assistant City Manager Lopez. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll try this microphone. Can everyone hear me? Well, great, thank you. Had a little bit of a problem earlier. I'll try to speak up a little louder. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, standing in place of Debbie Lopez and her very capable team on the Human Services Division of your Community Services Department. The report before you this evening is intended to provide you a comprehensive update on the variety of initiatives that city staff has undertaken over the last few years to address the challenge of homelessness here locally. Updates are going to be provided on the efforts we've undertaken specifically to address this population during the pandemic, the programs and services that we've delivered thanks to grant funding that we've pursued and received, how the city has responded to quality of life type concerns that have been expressed by our residents over the last few years, to provide you an update on the recent point in time count that's been led by LASA, as well as to share the results of a separate homeless census that was completed by the city working in partnership with a nonprofit organization. Lastly, I also want to provide an update on the sub-regional homeless housing program that we discussed just a little over a year ago. Next slide, please. As we all know, homelessness is one of the foremost issues that is challenging all levels of government, not just here in our San Gabriel Valley, but throughout Southern California, throughout the state, throughout the country. Glendora is certainly no exception to this. Our neighboring cities, our region and state are all being challenged by this issue and are working actively to try and address it. Over the last 5 years, in particular, the city has taken several actions to kind of study the issue here locally, kind of to develop a plan to help address the challenges that we're facing here based on our local conditions. But more than that, we've taken steps to help get us on a path to solving that challenge. Next slide, please. We've done that through the provision of programs and services, working with other nonprofit organizations, as well as our public agency partners. The city has also secured temporary housing through the pandemic, and I'll provide a few more details on that a little later in the presentation, as well as explored the possibility of a sub-regional housing program working with some of our neighboring jurisdictions. And I'll provide a few more details on those programs in just a few slides. Next slide, please. Throughout the duration of the pandemic, the city has worked to provide temporary housing for individuals that have experienced homelessness. Now, we did this following guidance that was issued by the CDC as well as HUD, given that individuals experiencing homelessness were considered to be at a greater risk for the COVID pandemic. We've partnered with local motels and hotels, and with the support of our nonprofit partner, we were able to house 68 individuals and also provided them some supportive services. The totality of that, the stay in those local motels and hotels equated to more than 6,600 room nights. Union Station is our nonprofit partner. We've worked with them also to be able to house an additional 42 individuals in the state's Project Room Key program, which is a similar effort led by the county here locally. And we've placed 5 individuals in permanent housing. This was a critical program at a time when it was needed most, and Glendora stood up on its own for that program. Next slide, please. Staff has also actively worked to secure grant funding over the last few years to help support and augment the services that are provided in our community. I'll talk to 3 specific grants. The first was a grant that we secured working through the local council of governments. That was a direct allocation of $240,000 that provided funding for motel vouchers, for encampment cleanup activities, for reunification activities. This is when we're able to connect an individual back to their family and provide transportation to them to reconnect and reunify them with their home unit. And lastly, also for prevention and diversion programs. The other 2 grants we received were administered in partnership with other jurisdictions. Those were shared resources, again, working with our nonprofit partner, Union Station. They're aptly named the 3 cities grant and 5 cities grant, given the number of cities that were participated in each of the grants. But combined outcomes demonstrated some measurable progress there. 154 individuals were contacted and engaged through outreach. 22 were enrolled in rapid rehousing. 19 were provided separate motel vouchers. 36 were referred to other specialized supportive resources, and 11 have been permanently housed. Again, those are good markers that demonstrate the progress that is being made here locally. And those stats that I quoted are just specific to the city of Glendora. Our partner agencies also experienced some progress on their own. Next slide, please. As staff responds to the concerns that we receive that relate homelessness to its impact on quality of life, we've taken a very balanced but proactive approach to address those concerns. We see individuals that are clearly in need of assistance, those that are living in places that are not suitable for human habitation. So we engage, we try and connect those individuals to those services and resources. But by equal measure, we also engage to abate unsafe or unsanitary conditions and help mitigate or abate those public safety concerns. So the time period listed on the screen between March 2020 and February 2022, we've conducted 27 encampment cleanups. That's resulted in the removal of just over 74 tons of trash and debris, more than 1,200 pounds of human waste, 90 pounds of needles, 30 pounds of hazardous materials, as well as 19 propane tanks. These are also measurable statistics that provide a measure of the progress that's been made. And these next 2 slides in particular show kind of the before and after pictures of these engagements specifically. These pictures are all of the South Hills area. If you move on to the next slide, please, you'll see all that trash and debris has been removed from those particular areas. Our intent there is to be able to return those places back to what their intended use is. Again, part of our process requires us to engage with those individuals, to properly notice them, to give them advance notice of the cleanup activities, and hopefully convince them to accept services at that particular moment in time. Next slide, please. Following a 1-year hiatus as a result of the pandemic, LAHSA again conducted the annual point in time count just a few weeks ago. This is a critically important effort that fulfills HUD's mandate to paint a picture of the progress and identify trends amongst the homeless population. This is information that's critical to us, as it helps us determine how best to allocate resources and distribute the supportive services that are needed throughout the county. This year's point in time count was conducted over a 3-day period, and the San Gabriel Valley was the focus of the first night of those activities on February 22nd. You might recall that also happened to be a city council evening. In Glendora, we had a total of 24 participants that were part of the program this year. Those 24 participants covered the city's 37 census tracts. This is also the first year that the point in time count was conducted electronically via mobile application. So all of the volunteers, all of our participants were able to track that information on their phone. It was quickly dispersed back to Lawson, and we hope to get that information back relatively soon, within the next month or two. Next slide, please. This just quick by way of background, the last point in time counts that have been conducted. Our most recent point in time count was done in 2020. At that particular time, we had identified 145 unsheltered individuals. You see the trend line going back to 2016 there. Our goal, our hope is that this year's point in time count will help us paint a better picture as to how the pandemic has impacted the homeless population in our community and throughout the county. Next slide, please. Because of the fact that the point in time count last year was postponed and really not knowing how the pandemic would impact the potentiality of a point in time count being conducted this year, the city contracted with CityNet to conduct a specific census of individuals experiencing homelessness on Glendora. This census occurred over a 2-day period last November. Our staff worked with CityNet to conduct that. And again, the focus of that effort was just simply the city of Glendora. This was unique to us. The census is a bit different from the HUD mandated point in time count. It is complementary. So part of that census was a survey. So our staff members, our nonprofit partners interviewed 91 individuals experiencing homelessness to gather specific data points to better capture the demographics of our homeless population in our community. 113 individuals, unsheltered individuals, were identified in our community at that particular time. So the composite of the highest frequency responses paints kind of a picture of our archetypical individual experiencing homelessness in the city. It is a white male between the age of 35 and 44 who sleeps in the city on a nightly basis. A few other key statistics, if we can move on to the next slide. 41% of the surveyed individuals are defined as chronically homeless, which means that they've been homeless for more than a year and have some level of permanent disability or substance abuse or mental health challenge. Just over a quarter of those individuals reported being homeless for less than a year. The largest percentage of respondents, just over a third, indicated that they'd been homeless for 3 to 5 years. 45% of individuals reported receiving some form of income, and more than a third of the respondents reported earning more than $1,000 per month. Of note, just over a quarter of all respondents shared that that income was obtained through employment or another source of earned income. 82.4% of responses reported that they primarily sleep in the city of Glendora, and just under a quarter of those respondents reported that their last permanent residence was, in fact, in the city of Glendora. And just under 31% of respondents noted that they are survivors of domestic violence. These are just a few data points collected by the census. The entire draft document is included as an attachment of your staff report. Next slide, please. The sub-regional housing, homeless housing program was developed in late 2020, early 2021 in consultation with Supervisor Barger's office as well as LASA to help address a critical need in our community as well as in the surrounding area, and better to help address more directly the lack of equitable Measure H funding, supportive services and housing opportunities that are currently available in our region, in our sub-region of the San Gabriel Valley. The program set out to work in partnership with 3 cities, the cities of San Dimas, Laverne, and Claremont, each of which would take on a component of the plan in order to develop a sub-regional ecosystem of services. The city of Glendora was exploring an interim housing opportunity. San Dimas was exploring an emergency shelter. Laverne was exploring an access center, and Claremont was exploring a permanent supportive housing project. Next slide, please. Since that dialogue commenced last year, progress, unfortunately, on this sub-regional effort has stalled. There is uncertainty related to two components of the plan. And as a consequence, there is uncertainty related to the funding that was initially committed to this project as part of that sub-regional program. Given this, should the City Council wish to proceed with an interim housing opportunity, an alternative approach would need to be pursued and direction provided by the City Council this evening. Next slide, please. Through discussion of this particular program, 3 sites were previously identified where interim housing could be developed without any zoning changes. Those 3 properties are identified on the map on the screen. If the city was to proceed with any of these particular locations, the property would need to be acquired and subsequently improved in order to accommodate the proposed use, however we define that to be. We would also need to identify ongoing operational funding for that facility. There exist funding opportunities that the city can pursue. We'll just need to define our project concept to refine our approach. We heard recently from the San Gabriel Valley Housing Trust and some of the work that they have undertaken in this particular arena. Measure H remains an option that we could pursue. The state has also made available some funding opportunities such as Project Room Key, or Home Key, as well as other grant funding opportunities that are currently being funneled through Los Angeles County. The considerations before you tonight are to proceed with the previously identified project concept on those sites, to explore potentially other alternative partnership opportunities, or explore alternative properties and sites. And we certainly look forward to that discussion and direction. Next slide, please. As part of this evening's update, staff is recommending that we award 2 service agreements, one with Allocations, a new nonprofit partner for the city, as well as another with Union Station. I won't go through all of Allocations' background. We've included that as part of your staff report, but they are a well-established nonprofit organization that provides an array of supportive services in support of the efforts to address homelessness. They've partnered with a number of jurisdictions here in Southern California. We learned about their partnership with the city of Alhambra through the Council of Governments. There they combine the provision of outreach, emergency interim housing, as well as case management, working alongside Alhambra city staff. We would seek to replicate a similar type program here in the city of Glendora that would include 2 full-time outreach navigators. They would include a vehicle for them to be able to transport individuals. They would provide 8 temporary emergency shelter beds that are exclusively designated for the city of Glendora. Those beds are not unique to a specific facility. They would be to one of the specialized facilities that they have depending on an individual's needs, as well as the provision of active case management. The contract proposed for you this evening is for 2 years with a potential 1-year extension, and funding for that agreement would be made available through the set aside that you previously approved as part of the ARPA funding expenditure plan. Next slide, please. The second agreement would be with Union Station Homeless Services. I think all of you are familiar with Union Station. They've been our nonprofit partner on the 2 grants that I previously referred to, and we have a very good working relationship with them. This service agreement would continue the services of the housing navigator that's currently assigned to the city of Glendora for 1 additional year. It will be an exclusive arrangement with the city of Glendora. Our navigator has helped staff navigate program and service availability. They actively engage and provide and participate in our outreach activities and also conduct case management services. We want to continue to build on the progress that has been made and that I shared with you previously. Similar to the agreement with Allocations, this too would be funded by the set aside that you previously approved for homelessness as part of the expenditure plan for ARPA funds. Next slide, please. Before I get into the recommendations, I just want to highlight that Again, the report this evening was intended to provide kind of a comprehensive update on the efforts that have been undertaken by your city staff. Progress has been made clearly, but there remains a lot of work to be done. And it's important to note that while we have undertaken these efforts, we've managed to do it on our own. As all of you are aware, there's an active ongoing conversation through the Blue Ribbon Committee on Homelessness to find a new governance model to hopefully secure some of that funding through Measure H to be able to do more here locally to address our particular challenges. We've been engaged as part of that process. We will continue to be engaged with that process, seeing it through. Hopefully, as we understand, the Board of Supervisors will consider the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Committee either late this month or early part of next month. So we'll be happy to report whatever actions are made at that particular time. With that, Mayor, our recommendations are as follows. One, that you receive this comprehensive update on all activities related to homelessness in our city. Two, that you receive an update on the sub-regional housing program and provide direction on future housing opportunities given where we're at with that particular effort. That you award a professional services agreement with Allocations for the term described to you. Then authorize the city manager or his designee to enter into that professional services agreement, including with the potential 1-year extension for that agreement. Next slide, please. Already there. Number 5, authorize the Administrative Services Director to appropriate the requisite funding for the agreement with Allocations as part of the expenditure plan for the American Rescue Plan Act funding. Number 6 is an award of a professional services agreement with Union Station Homeless Outreach Services in the amount of $100,000 for that 1-year contract. Again, authorizing the city manager or his designee to enter into that professional services agreement with Union Station. And lastly, authorizing the Administrative Services Director to appropriate the requisite funding for that agreement. That concludes my presentation, Mayor. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Thompson.
Madam Mayor, thank you. And this has been a fire hose experience. You've covered a lot of ground. And I think it's important to pause for a moment and make sure that the public knows what our city has done, the compassion, the empathy, and the thoughtful expression that we've given to those that don't have a home, especially during these last couple of years that have been horrific for all of us. Those that have homes and those that don't have homes, especially. And this is a issue that none of us like to talk about, none of us like to see, and yet the city has done amazing work as we have stood up and attempted to take care of our own and even those that are not our own, which is what this city has always done. And I want to just make sure that the public knows that. On slides 4 and 5, it's extraordinary what we've done in terms of housing people for over 6,000 nights. And I know that we've had a presentation about drought, but a couple of years ago, we had rain and cold. And I know that the hotels that are around here, some of them we worked with to house some of these friends of ours, people that live in this town, that shop in this town. And that's what this town is about. So thank you for pointing that out. And I believe that that's really an important thing. I also want to make sure that the public knows that what we've done to pick up what is left from some of these folks. Over 75 tons of trash. We can all have our opinions about it, but nevertheless, we've done that in a way that has been good and respectful of those folks. I know that the chief and his team have gone up and interacted and do interact, and Mrs. Lopez does and simply an amazing job to treat those folks with the kind of respect that the city should and continues to do. And that's been done at our expense. I also want to thank staff for pursuing grants and monies from the system, both federal and state, county, that has enabled us to leverage our interest to make sure that this has been done well. All of that to say that I am very supportive of the 8 points that have been outlined. At some point, and I know that that we've all talked about it, at some point we're going to have to own the fact that there's going to be a place here in this town that will house, will service those people that are trying to go from the street to a permanent home. I don't know where that's going to be. I commend the mayor pro tem, for their continued effort to work in this space. They have reported out a lot of thoughts and hard work that they've done. And I want to give them and the effort that they've done my support, but also alert our own people that there's going to come a time where there's going to be a place here for these people to live. Maybe not forever, but as they move from where, where they are. I don't know what that means. We had a presentation, I believe, on March the 22nd. Marissa from, is it SCAG or COG? COG. I get the two mixed up. She and that group has done incredible work. The presentation that they made, and I'm hopeful that maybe that can happen here someday. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you for the 8 points that you have outlined, especially those points 3, 5, 6, and 8 that have some monetary assistance with it. I am excited that CADA will offer us boots that are on the ground to help us. I think that we need that. We definitely need that. The questions that I had were addressed, earlier today with you and our city manager and my briefing partner, David. So I don't have any questions to ask. I just have opinions to have offered, which I've tried to do in a very concise way. So thank you for covering a lot of ground in a short amount of time and informing us and enlightening us on a situation that's got a lot of moving parts. You did an excellent job. So thank you. And I support these. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Moises. Great report. Sobering numbers. There are successes there. It's not unrecognized. And certainly the team and the staff that works with our homeless population is extraordinary. I too support these, and I echo many of Mendel's comments. I shudder at the cost of 75 tons of stuff collected and what that revenue could have done for more fun things like Easter egg hunts and such, but it's a reality, and I encourage us to move quickly so maybe we can reduce that opportunity that's happening in our hills. I support these items, but I also encourage us, and I get frustrated with the difficulty of getting funds easily from the folks that have the money, the county and the state, and recognize they also have the healthcare services that most of these people in need of help need. we are not a health department. We're not a mental health agency. So I implore us to keep prospecting for grants, but keep the hammer up on them to say, give us our money and let us have what's due to us, or come provide those services. I think that the funding through ARPA is wise, and it was a great choice that was made. But if we look at a long-term housing opportunity, being an interim solution for the guest, I don't think we should carry that freight by ourselves at all. I think the state and the county need to fund that. So continued prospecting. I know the Blue Ribbon Committee is on the local city side, and I encourage that. And I also applaud the fact that you and the city manager have a presence on that committee and made on record statements, and it's being presented to the Board of Supervisors soon. So our residents need to know we are in fact on the map there also. So that's important. But let's keep that prospecting going and keep the grants going. If we pick something, I don't think we can afford to, pick a solution for housing. We can't afford to fund that alone. So they have to step up and give us that help. So, and I like some of the ideas and some of the things that neighboring cities have done with shelter pallet homes and service facilities right on site. So those are great opportunities that we should pursue. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Alawas.
Thank you, Karen. Moises, you did an amazing staff report. It's just absolutely amazing. And special thanks goes out to Debbie Lopez and our Glendora PD. They're a great team, and they've done an amazing job in working this issue. I have a few questions. Did we share our funded survey with LASA?
No, we have not.
Are we going to share it with them so that they have a baseline so that they hopefully are comparable?
We are more than happy to share that with LASA.
Okay. So this is all ARPA funding that you're recommending to fund the 8 items.
That's correct.
And you're still going to try to get some either state or county or even Measure H funding to help augment this?
Yes, that will not stop. We will be in search of prospecting, as Councilmember Friedendahl mentioned, to ensure that we can continue providing those services here locally.
So I read quite a bit on, and we had conversation on the CADA program. Sounds like an amazing program you guys found. My hat's off to you. But as I asked before, what if the homeless individual does not want the services? What do you do? And we don't necessarily would have the beds at that time. How do you square that?
That's part of the ongoing challenge that we face today because of court rulings and the legal framework that we have to operate in under. There are limits to what we can do to what we can provide for an individual who does not want services. We can't force individuals to accept service. That's absolutely clear. And so if beds are not available, we don't typically enforce. We try to convince folks to accept services or to be able to help us address whatever issue that we're currently facing. But we're very, very limited in what we can do when applying legal recourse to those particular situations.
So in doing the math, we had about 113 individuals that were counted. And the math looks like about 25 of them roughly have a direct connection with, actually we're from Glendora, and the rest may have had a subsequent connection. Is that about accurate?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So historically, we've always had about 20 to 25 individuals in Glendora that were homeless. So these are folks from other areas that have some sort of connection.
I think that chart showed a little bit higher percentage connection.
If you look at page 17 of the draft survey, the community tie heading, it identifies where respondents usually spend their days. The previous page shows where respondents usually sleep, and I believe the following page provides, actually 2 pages forward on page 19 shows where their last permanent residence was. According to these statistics of the folks that responded, just over 23% identified Glendora as their last permanent residence.
So around 25 individuals.
About a quarter.
Okay. On the survey about homeless white males between 35 and 45, they have either permanent disability, substance abuse, or mental health issues. How is CADA going to be able to address some of these issues?
Yes, so part of the stock of available housing that we will have access to is that they provide housing at different levels. So they have beds in emergency shelters, what we consider an emergency shelter. They have beds in what are considered transitional shelters. There are also beds at facilities that have a speciality. So folks that have behavioral health needs will be directed to those resources, or folks with substance abuse needs will be directed to those resources. So that we have a menu of options available to us depending on that individual's need.
So is Union Station complementary to CADA?
Yes, we will make sure that the partnership that we have with Union Station and hope to have through this next contract will work very well.
Is there a substitute to Union Station?
No, not currently.
So with these individuals that are of an age that can be employed, is there going to be a service to employment to be able to help them?
Yeah, that happens as part of their case management services.
That's
And
CADA or Union Station?
both, actually. That's a service that we're looking to augment from what we currently provide. And so part of that path to self-sufficiency is first addressing whether they have whether an individual has substance abuse challenges or mental health challenges, and develop a plan that's specific to that individual. So you start addressing these issues and kind of put them on a roadmap that they agree to, and hopefully get them back into gainful employment.
So I had a conversation today with Azusa, and they've allocated $1.9 million of their ARPA funding towards this. They've not identified what they're going to do, but they are not at this point in time going to develop anything permanent. It will be something more of a tent type situation with services brought in from faith-based and things of that nature. And I would hope that we would look at that first before we build something permanent, because I'm concerned with sustainability moving forward. Because I would imagine the running of the operation is going to be more expensive than actually building it, particularly over long term. And there was a conversation held by Judge Carter with a group of cities, and his thought process is a place of dignity is where his hallmark and his benchmark is for what we do moving forward. And I guess the three cities, Jawardi, Azusa, and Irwindale, had come up with a term of trauma informative housing, which you've heard of. And that's a unique approach to be able to provide these services for a short term to help get these folks, into substantive housing, long term, things of that nature. But they don't want to enable these folks to be continuously homeless. And that's their thought process, which I would agree with. Now, moving forward with this, if we do have some of these locations identified, and whether we end up going for something that's permanent or we do a tent situation, in the meantime, is there a possibility with your report talking about some of the RVs that are parked in different areas? And we have the RVs that are parked up in the hillsides, which is dangerous as well. Is it possible or safe for areas such as Pompey Park, when we have during the week when it's not being utilized, to have short-term passes for these folks to have safe harbor in those areas? Is that something that we've looked into or even could look into in the meantime?
It is something that we've previously talked about. Citrus College, for example, has a program for homeless students, Safeway. There have been some pretty significant challenges in areas where gatherings are allowed after hours, in certain cases unsupervised. We typically look at areas that we receive most comments on, like Arrow Highway, and Arrow Highway is controlled by the county. We don't have any jurisdiction in some of the areas in the foothills. Is obviously we've had online conversations where the same thing occurred. The city doesn't have the ability to go in and enforce in some of those areas, and so we rely on partnerships with LA County Fire and LA County Department of Public Works to help us enforce some of those high fire hazard severity areas. So but again, individuals living in RVs, the ultimate goal is to provide permanent housing, and sort of to look at that. At this point, we've seen some more challenges with parking lot solutions because individuals don't tend to move. Some cases, those RVs or trailers are not mobile. they're towed or moved to an area, and that's where they stay for a period of time. And so that is not something we've looked at yet, but would be happy to, if that's the will of the council, to investigate some of those options.
I guess as long as they can go under their own power, that would be a solution. Otherwise, Jan's towing. So that's just in closing, I just want to make sure that whatever direction we go and we do, it's with sustainability in mind, because Measure H funding is going to run out in 5 years, and the consensus is it's not going to get renewed. And so if we were to build something wanting to have Measure H funding, it more than likely won't be there, and then we're going to have a long-term problem. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Karen. Great presentation, Moises, but I do have a couple of questions. You noted that between April 2020 and March of 2022, we basically were able to find temporary housing for 110 different individuals. And we only had the opportunity to move 5 individuals into permanent housing. Was there additional opportunities of people that declined permanent housing for various reasons?
I don't have any specific data to answer your question. Traditionally, the challenge is finding permanent places, permanent homes, frankly. A lot of effort is made into building relationships with landlords specifically to be able to transition folks from a transitional setting or temporary setting into that permanent housing. So that's typically the pinch point in the process.
Yeah, appreciate it. And then, you also mentioned when we talked about the cleanups, I got to tell you the number that just jumped out at me is 90 pounds of needles. I don't know how much those needles weigh, but I'll bet it's got to be at least 20 or so to a pound. So it's an unbelievable amount of needles. And so this is when we think about the homeless issues that we deal with in our everyday lives, it's the residual effect of things that are left behind. And I can just share that, we were recently at an event and Michael and I were sort of standing and looked down, and there was a needle that we were standing on top of down in the South Hills area. And, so it's one of those things that staff has done a great job. I look around at what some other cities are dealing with, and we have a lot of opportunities to do some different things, and I'm supportive of everything we've done here. I think it's time for us to go ahead and investigate the sites that we've already identified. Those sites were identified, I think, back in 2010. And I know for a fact at least one of those sites has sold between 2010 and now. So the owners of those properties at this point, as of right now, I don't think they may not even know that they're identified as possible sites for us. So I think it's time that we start that conversation, at least reach out to those particular sites so we know if those are options, not saying that they would be the final sites. I appreciate, Michael, where you're coming from with the idea of looking at more of a temporary solution, but I keep reminding people that if anybody ever watched the Andy Griffith Show, those gentlemen that were camping down by the lake that Opie hung out with on various episodes were basically homeless individuals. And so this is an issue that's been around for a long time, and it's going to continue to be around for a very long time. And I think it's time we look at more permanent solutions. Whether or not the funding will be there in the future, I don't know. But if it's not, I think we have to figure out a way to make something happen. I support the idea of interim housing. For a variety of different reasons, because I think our job is more to help people move on with their lives, whether that be to help them get clean, help them find jobs, help them find permanent housing. The unfortunate thing is there's a certain population that we're never going to be able to help. And that's just a fact. On the other hand, I can tell you for a fact, there's at least one individual on the streets tonight that I've known since he was 10 years old. And he has drug issues and he's had some other issues his entire life. He's not a bad human being. He does bad things. And so those are the types of things that we need to look at moving forward. And I think it's time for us to start taking a hard look at the locations that we at least have identified. So we know whether or not those might be a long-term solution. And if not, then it's going to be time for us to start looking at other possible locations. So I support all the recommendations, but we asked about some other direction. I'd like to see us take that next step and start looking at the locations that we have identified already.
Gary, are you looking at actually building something hardscape?
Yes, either building something or buying something and converting it.
Mhm.
And when it comes to interim housing, you're talking about a situation in which there would be services available, but the services would be, these individuals need to qualify for the properties, and they'd be the types of individuals that'd be willing to accept services. And so there's a variety of different things we can do, but I think that is where the money would be best spent. And some of the locations that we already have identified, they have buildings on them already. They could be converted into barracks type of living or shared locations where multiple people were in one room or something like that.
Dormitory style.
Yeah. So
How many units or how many individuals would you plan on having?
I don't know.
We've
You know,
talked
we'd have
about
to look.
between 35 to 50.
So anyway, I just think it's time to take that next step and actually look and talk to the people at those sites and see if those sites are going to be a possibility.
And interim housing is for how long?
Up to 90 days
Mhm.
with the possibility of an additional 90-day extension.
And you would find an outside service to manage it?
Right, you have wraparound services.
Well,
Mhm.
you'd have like someone like Union Station or Cater or somebody like that.
Right,
Probably.
or VOA or someone.
Any idea what that cost might be?
Nope.
No, and I would concur. The Mayor Pro Tem and I have been discussing this, and I think that, we've waited for these other cities, and I think the waiting time is over. I think, sorry, if they don't want to come along, that's their choice, but we need to do something. As I've driven literally all the way to Humboldt County and to the east and to the west, there is not one single city in the state of California, regardless of size, that hasn't been impacted by homelessness. And so every single city, regardless of who you are, needs to do something. And it's about time that Glendora do something. So I would concur that we need to seriously look at those options and see what's going to be best, and look at the funding possibilities and what services can be provided. I think the pallet housing that Baldwin Park has done in cooperation with the COG and the Housing Trust is one viable option, and there may be others. As the Mayor Pro Tem said, I've seen an office building that's been converted into shared housing. And so that's another possibility. So it could be a combination, but I think it's past time that we do something. So
Mayor, I have a
I would
question for
concur
staff.
that, yes.
I know that HUD has been active in our city and utilizing some of the rental space that we have. Are you folks aware of that?
We know that there are individuals in Glendora that have vouchers.
You don't know where they're from.
No, I don't have that access to that information.
Is there a way that we can work with HUD to find out what they're doing to take up our rentals for our homeless that we have here and not from somewhere else?
Is just for some help with clarity. So having vouchers for homeless program is usually up to the homeowner who has it's called a Section 8 voucher for example. Those are typically matched up with people in the general area is usually what happens. So it's not like in other cities going to renters in our city and saying, we're going to place our homeless individuals in their city. That's not what occurs there. So it's a federal program that homeowners can take advantage of, or property developers can take advantage of. I mean, I think a case in point, we talked a little bit about those properties, a little bit of background just for everyone so they have the understanding. The state required all cities to zone for emergency shelter up to a minimum of 20 people up. The city and the areas that were shown were previously identified in 2010 as areas. So those were previously identified. Every city in the state of California has to have that. Coming up with the new housing element, the city will have to adopt emergency shelter beds for a total that equates the number of homeless individuals in the point in time count. So our recent point in time count where the information will be then shared, cities, every city in the state of California will have to zone for their homeless count number in those areas. So, and these are by right areas. So those individual rooms that you're talking about are in addition to, and so part of the thought process was, as was explained this evening, as the city tries to build enough rooms in our community to help us, essentially homelessness is expensive, right? From loss of quality of life to actual cleanup costs to staff costs, that we try to find some of those transition areas within our own community, and that will be part of it. So we more than willing to reach out and talk to HUD to see what we can find, to see what sort of that environment looks like. But it's not just germane in this area, but any homeowner has that ability for the most part to enter into a program like that.
And I'm not aware of any HUD housing besides the Glendora Gardens apartments. Most of the people I know that have had a Section 8 voucher, there's nowhere in Glendora they can usually find.
I know several firsthand. So is there a way we can get an inventory though of that? Just so we have an overall idea of what the city is doing for housing homeless?
Yeah, we could definitely make an inquiry. I don't know what information is publicly available, but if it's HUD, usually most stuff's on their website buried in some report somewhere. So
Okay, I'll help you get some information if you need it. Thanks.
I think it's important to identify exactly what it is that you're looking for, because there's so many different HUD programs that
Yeah,
are
and there's a
available.
Well,
difference.
individual owners, as Adam said, can utilize the HUD program. They contact them and say, listen, I want to put our property up for HUD for availability for homeless. And then they go through an inspection process and an interview process, and then they end up renting the property through the federal government.
Okay, so you're looking for information on just a HUD homeless program.
Yeah, how many HUD sponsored
Okay.
homeless are in the city?
Yeah, because to try to do an inventory of all of the various HUD supported housing in the city of Glendora would be extensive.
Right, but I'm sure that they would have that statistic for us.
Yeah, well, we could, just for clarity's sake, HUD funds the vouchers that pay the rent.
Mhm.
That program is typically administered locally, usually through a housing authority or the continuum of care, in this case.
And they
LAHSA.
have consultants also that go do
Sure,
that.
sure. We have a very large county, so consultants provide that service. The vouchers are themselves, to be absolutely clear, not just for homeless folks or formerly homeless folks, but for
Low
folks
income.
low income.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's a much broader demographic.
Right. And that's what I think the difference is that what we're speaking of in this interim housing would be providing wraparound services, not just a voucher to someone, because we're taking folks who are literally on the street and trying to help them rebuild and move somewhere else.
Understood. I'm just trying to get a broader picture of what's going
Yeah.
on.
And I don't think the issue is that people, I mean, the people using those vouchers are people who need housing. So it's not take it away from one person to give to another. I think the issue is that we don't have enough housing, period. It's not, oh, you used my voucher. So I think it's just a shell game, but we still, at the end of the day, need to create more housing.
Right, but it's availability for our local homeless issue that we have, as opposed to having someone from outside the area utilize shelter that we can use for homeless.
Are you saying that the individual homes for the housing is going to replace a shelter for housing or
Oh,
interim
it'd be just
housing?
nice to talk to HUD and say, listen, let's put a priority on our homeless issue here that we have here. And they
Well-
can do the same for other cities as well that have HUD availability of homes. So anyway, but thank you, Adam, for that information. Moises.
So is someone ready to make a motion to receive these items and to also have the addition of asking staff to pursue looking at this property and looking at possibilities for these projects?
Madam Mayor, I would move all of that, what you just said, the items 1 through 8, in addition to what the Mayor Pro Tem said in terms of looking at the properties that we've shown to be viable, and begins some dialogue there.
Thank you. There is a motion if you want to make a vote to motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. And that is a second by Mayor Pro Tem Boyer. If we can vote, please. And I'll take a roll call vote for the Zoom participants. Oh, sorry about that. Let me remove that. I'm going to take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedendahl.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer.
Yes.
And Mayor Davis.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Lopez, you get to continue with item 11 as we consider introducing for first reading an ordinance adding new sections 9.20.120 through 9.120.130 to chapter 9.20 Parks and Public Places of Title 9, Public Peace, Morals, and Safety of the Glendora Municipal Code to regulate homeless encampments on, near, or upon critical infrastructure, sensitive use property, or in areas of high fire risk. So welcome
Thank you,
again.
Mayor. This will actually be a tag team presentation. Our city attorney, Mr. Winder, will actually start the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. We turn now to the regulatory side of dealing with our unhoused population. The law in this area has been very challenging, as has our unhoused population been very challenging. There was an important case that 4 of you know about a great deal that predates Councilmember Friedendahl's election to the council. That case is known as the City of Boise case, which the Ninth Circuit said for the first time in judicial history that criminalizing homelessness where there is no available housing is a violation of the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And that court essentially said that before you can enforce city anti-camping ordinances, you must first make sure that there is available housing, and that available housing has to be made available to the unhoused, and the unhoused have to, after all of your efforts, decline to be housed. And at that point, you may be able to enforce your anti-camping ordinances. That ruling out of an 11-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit, what is known as an en banc panel of the Ninth Circuit, included with it a scathing dissent that basically warned that the danger that would flow from that is that you would have the unhoused living literally everywhere. And so cities, and Glendora in particular, struggled with that issue, and we modified our ordinance. And the approach that this city has taken to just amplify the presentation that's been made by your assistant city manager and your comments was a very humane approach, because we decided to decriminalize being homeless. And we adopted, the council adopted amendments to the code that addresses the Boise decision. Since then, there have been a number of cases that have tried to extrapolate some of the meaning that was derived out of the generalized language in the Boise opinion. In particular, the Boise opinion said that in a theoretical sense, an ordinance prohibiting sitting, lying, or sleeping outside at particular times or in particularly sensitive locations might well be constitutionally permissible. The court didn't actually address the issue there, but it posited in what in the law is known as dicta, meaning opinion unnecessary to the decision of the court, but still providing some judicial guidance about the possibility of additional regulatory reform. Since then, there have been 3 cases that have tried to tackle that issue. And that body of law is cited and discussed with you in your staff report that recognizes that that there may be areas in communities that are so sensitive or they're near critical infrastructure that being unhoused and living there represents a significant public danger, such that even if housing alternatives were unavailable, a city could regulate and prohibit homeless individuals from camping in those sensitive or critical infrastructure areas. So we have looked at those ordinances that have been upheld by federal district courts in several districts within the Ninth Circuit. We've looked at what some of the larger cities in Los Angeles County have done to address that issue. And working with staff and working with law enforcement, we crafted an ordinance that addresses this problem and provides some additional regulatory authority to prohibit unhoused people from living either permanently or on an interim basis in these sensitive areas or where there is critical infrastructure. That ordinance is before you tonight. Again, it is not an effort to criminalize homelessness, but it is a recognition that in addition to everything that was discussed in your prior staff report, there are times when cities need regulatory authority for the benefit of public health, safety, general welfare, and to protect its own critical infrastructure. And that's what this ordinance before you does tonight. And with that, I'll let the Assistant City Manager introduce the ordinance to you and summarize its key provisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. As Bill mentioned, the proposed ordinance is really intended to provide an additional tool to help address and mitigate a threat to the public health, safety, and welfare of both residents and those individuals that are experiencing homelessness in 3 areas. 1, in areas where critical infrastructure exists. 2, where sensitive areas are as is defined in the proposed ordinance, as well as those areas of high fire risk. Staff would effectively be empowered to remove individuals camping in those areas based on a set of criteria. As Bill alluded to, the proposed ordinance is similar to ordinances that have been adopted by other jurisdictions. It's critically important to note that the ordinance has been crafted to be compliant with existing law. Next slide, please. Moving through the ordinance, I won't go through all of these provisions, but it would make it unlawful for individuals to encamp at the following locations, at places where there is critical infrastructure. That is a term that is defined in the proposed ordinance. Within 25 feet of that infrastructure, portions of right-of-way that are required by local, state, or federal law enforcement to be free of any obstructions to first responders within a high fire danger area. Next slide, please. Within a particular distance of 300 feet of a property that is designated as a sensitive use, within 10 feet of any operational or utilizable driveway or loading dock, that just being a line of sight safety condition, within 2 feet of any fire hydrant, fire plug, or other fire connection, again, to help mitigate those challenges that we've seen and experienced here in Glendora. Now, on the last slide, We can move on to the next slide. As we just discussed on the previous item, irrespective of the proposed ordinance, the city will continue to provide the array of services and programs to help individuals connect to the services that they need. The direction that we've received we will continue to implement faithfully and explore those alternative housing opportunities. But we feel strongly that this is a tool that we need if and when we need to move folks a little bit more quickly than what our current process would allow for. With that, if we could move on to the next slide, it is our recommendation that the City Council adopt the proposed ordinance this evening.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Alawas.
Bill, I know that you've been working on this for quite some time, and my hat's off to you because you had to go through an awful lot of legal opinion to put this together, and you showed that under your staff report. So thank you very much for doing this. I know it's a challenging subject to go through, but as we know, with the water report, we have a drought, we have a high fire severity issues coming up, and I know that many other cities in the foothills are dealing with this, and it's really, really challenging. And on our residents, particularly around the foothills to the north and the South Hills, they're going to be deeply impacted if we don't take action on this. So thank you very much, and to you, Moises, for all the work that you've done. Again, this has been a long process, and I really appreciate all the hard work that you put into it. So thank you very much.
Mayor, if I could interject, I
Yes.
would also like to acknowledge and thank Assistant Chief Flores, who has been an excellent resource for us as we've explored a variety of options related to this ordinance and some of the housing issues that we've had to deal with as part of our housing element process and new legislation like SB 9 that we've had to navigate. And Chief Flores has been instrumental in helping us craft good policy recommendations that we feel are pragmatic and implementable here locally.
Thank you. Councilmember Frindall.
Thank you, Mayor. I support this and I think it's a valid ordinance. I'm going to ask the hard question. We have many ordinances that we've addressed towards some of these things, and the bulky item ordinance, the shopping cart ordinance. So I guess my hard question is, are we looking to do this to have another tool in our toolbox, or are we looking to exercise this regularly and not elective or selectively, but use that tool and move forward with it? Which I think ordinances have value, but they only have value if we make it an everyday tool.
So if I can give a partial response to that. Code enforcement in most cities and in this city is by complaint. So we would have to know about the problem in order to enforce whatever regulation is in place. And that applies to all code violations. So there may be times when it appears that we're selectively enforcing various regulatory ordinances of the city, particularly quality of life kinds of regulations, but that's largely driven by what we learn. And so it's one thing for us to have regulatory authority, but the citizens of this community are our eyes and ears. And if we don't know about it, we can't enforce it. That's point number one. Point number two, that with respect to the unhoused, the regulatory reforms that we've implemented post the city of Boise are always going to be the last resort. The first resort is what we've been talking about earlier today. We're going to try to persuade, cajole, I don't know what other terms you'd use, encourage homeless services that will avoid the need to use the regulatory tools that the city has available.
I was going to make that second point, but Bill said it so much more eloquently.
All right, I'll talk then. If you guys are gonna stare at me for a while, you know
I
what?
was
I'll
going to go
for it.
on to
Here-
Councilmember Thompson.
Here we
but
go. No,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think as Bill explained, these are all tools that we have to use the appropriate time. It's not a hard, fast rule that we can always go in and do something. We've talked a lot about tonight about LA contract and having additional rooms. We've worked through the past 18 months really hard on finding additional rooms, sometimes hotels and motels for those rooms. So we still have to have some of those resources available in our toolbox to implement some of these other tools as well, with a little more, for lack of a better term, excitement than we had previously. So this is the other side, right? In the carrot and the stick approach as we deal with homelessness moving forward. And so from a life safety standpoint, if there truly is a life safety issue, this provides us another tool to help address that more immediately. And so we say all the time, if you see something, say something, and we mean it here too. Just because you see an issue one day, sometimes we come in and address it, and then the very next day it's back, it's just something different. So don't be afraid to say something. Don't be afraid if you have questions to contact us frequently. Homelessness@cityofglendora.org is a great place to start. Call phone numbers, and we will, to the extent possible, enforce our ordinances.
Councilmember Thompson.
Madam Mayor, thank you. And I echo, everything that Michael and David just said. Bill, just a technical question on page 7 of the PowerPoint. You mentioned bullet point number 4, within 2 feet of a fire plug, a connection. Why is it 2 feet? 2 feet is not much. And I know the assistant chief, when you see some of his folks in their full gear, their boots are 2 feet wide. So was this a clerical mistake? It should be 5 feet or 10 feet or is there some esoteric legal
There is no esoteric
statement that you're going to say that back in 1910 it was deemed that 2 feet by the Greeks were the appropriate way to handle it?
I'd like to be able to say that, but I won't be able to.
Okay.
So, I don't know where we came.
I
up
just
with
think
it.
it's
I believe we modeled it off another approved.
Well, I'm sure we
ordinance.
modeled it from somebody
it
else.
doesn't
but-
seem consistent
but
with.
we should have thought our
I
way
mean,
through
personally,
that,
I'd
maybe.
like to see 5
5
feet or
feet?
10 feet
Yeah,
because
sure.
a fire plug or a hydrant, I don't want to, anybody near that. And I don't know what the chief would probably know. You can't park within X amount of feet of a,
It could have also
7
meant,
feet.
it could have also meant to say 25 feet and the 5 is missing.
Yeah. I mean, I've never got a ticket for it. I'm sure that Michael has, but his car is not even 7 feet long. So that's why he doesn't use the kind of water that I use on mine. So I, with all joking aside, I am serious. Maybe that 2 feet could be
Councilman,
expanded to 5 feet.
we will look
before
at
we
that.
Vote on this.
There's a lot of 25 feet in here. I think it's probably more likely that we missed the 5 on the back side of the 2.
Oh, that's probably what it is.
Could we agree to ministerially?
We will ministerially
correct
make that change, and when we come back for the second reading, we will make sure the right number's in there.
Madam Mayor, that's all I have to
Thank you.
ask. or
Appreciate
inquire
that
about.
catch. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
There's going to be people that look at this and think that the conversation we just had a few minutes ago is contradictory to the conversation we're having here. But one of the things we need to keep in mind is that, there are people on the street that cause issues for our community and for our residents. We have 50,000 people in town. We have approximately 100 people living on our streets. And some of them cause quite a bit of issue and they don't like to work within the system. And so I think we need as many tools as possible to try to encourage people that don't want to work within the system to do that. To David's point, I think we can all agree that we have seen an improvement in our situation when it comes to homelessness over the past couple of years. So some of these things are working. and every tool that we can give to law enforcement and to staff who are working with these people every night, I think it's important. So, I support this. And to mention the 2 feet, I've seen that before. And I assumed, and I don't know this, that may be for no other reason than to keep from using that fire hydrant as part of their structure. So as they're hanging things over the fire hydrants and using them to hold up different things, that was just why I assumed, because I have seen that 2 feet mentioned before around fire hydrants. So, but anyway, I support this. I'm looking forward to getting this in place, and hopefully it'll just be one more tool that we can use to try to help those in need.
Well, if we could just expand that out to whatever you guys think, then I would appreciate that. But that's a good idea too, Gary. I'm sure that's probably why. So.
Thank you. And looking at the CityNet report, for many of those individuals, they had income, they had insurance. What they were lacking was housing. So while I want to protect our infrastructure and our quality of life, until we have housing, and to make sure that we stay committed to that, I will abstain from voting on this, because we can never arrest our way out of this. It's about housing. So I want to make sure that we don't send that message that, oh, maybe we don't have to do that housing because we found this other fix. So until we have that housing, I can't fully support this. So that is my reason for abstaining on this. So with that, I will
Hey,
call
I-
from a.
I
Oh,
apologize, but you and I have this conversation all the time because
yes,
we also cannot tax our way out of this issue.
no,
And until we can get the decision makers in Sacramento to stop taxing housing, which there are a lot more bills that are being considered right now that are going to continue to drive up the cost of housing, we need to be talking to the people that are making those decisions that are driving these prices through the roofs.
right.
We need to stop. We need to stop the attacks on those that are providing housing. Landlords are getting out of the landlord business specifically because they're being regulated and taxed out of the business. So the issue is we need more rules like this so that we can get the decision makers to stop making decisions that continue to reduce the opportunity for housing for these individuals.
Well,
Move the ordinance 2067.
is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. That is a motion by Councilmember Alawas and a second by Councilmember Thompson. If we can vote. Thank you. That is to approve ordinance 2067, an ordinance of the City Council adding new section 9.20.120 through 9.20.130 to chapter 9.20 Parks and Public Places of Title IX Public Peace, Morals, and Safety of the Glendora Municipal Code to regulate homeless encampments on, near, or upon critical infrastructure, sensitive use property, or in areas of high risk. And also adding the administrative change of ordinance language from 2 feet to whatever, to 5 feet, from 5 feet to,
2 feet to 5
from
feet.
2 feet to 5 feet. Thank you very much. Subsection H, that will be noted in the minutes. Thank you. And I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Alawas.
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedendahl.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyer. And Mayor Davis will abstain, as she has
Thank
stated.
you.
Mhm. So that carries 401 with Mayor Davis abstaining.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Thank you, Mr. Winder. That takes us to member and staff closing comments. Anyone have any closing comments? Mr.
Good to
Boyer.
be back. Good to see everybody in person.
Yeah, I just want to echo what was just said and what our mayor said. Thank you to all of the staff that put endless hours into making this occur. And thank you. You've done a great job. Appreciate it.
Mr. Raymond, Mr. Winder? You went out there? Okay. With that, then we stand adjourned at 9:19 PM. Thank you.